Sup Shredders! My name is Logan, aka Spiderhands, and welcome to an SPReacts, where today we've got ourselves 3 tracks off an album from Omnism titled Asleep or Awake. And if we switch over to here, this is a 10-track album with the art up on the screen here that was released on June 6th, so quite recently, as of a month ago as the time of the recording. Looks pretty brutal. We're going to listen through each of these 3 tracks from start till finish. We're going to hear what we think. Starting with Deceptive Enchanter, let's go, let's do it. What have we got? Great tone there. It's nice to hear the bass as well. Such a crunchy tone on those guitars, that sounds ferocious. Adjustment of group there, nice. So that was an interesting one. Really good start to proceedings, strong across the board. Because in each of these post-track sections, they're going to provide an overall song analysis of everything from lyrics and vocals all the way through studio production, and then finally, we're going to have like an overall analysis of the tracks across the album itself. These 3 today, with any applicable constructive critique, and then finally my general thoughts from a listener's perspective. But before we go any further, what do we think this track is about? I kind of took a wee bit of the song for me to kind of get a feel for what the lyrics were trying to communicate. The words came through clearly for the most part, don't get me wrong, because that's not a thing you always take as a given with the fryish kind of rougher kind of middle vocals. Sometimes there's almost too much fry that the words aren't necessarily articulated as clearly as you need to be able to understand what the narrative. So I'm thankful for the fact that we have that going on here. What I think is really cool about this song in terms of the lyrics is that those who light the fire, like something along the lines of, will get like engulfed in their own flames. And I think if we just try to sort of align that as well as other lines with, Deceptive Enchanter, it's almost like people are being encouraged to do these kind of crazy zany things or to make these moves by people who just want to see the world burn. And maybe those people are getting hurt at the same time, and maybe it's a commentary on a lot of the kind of chaos that's going around in the world at the moment, for like better or worse, Objectively, I think it's an interesting way to start an album, and I appreciate the different angle in terms of the themes and lyrics. The vocal performance across the board is very strong. I thought that we did a great job with our vocal technique there. It's mainly sort of fryish parts. There was some sort of like crowd chants and like kind of background vocals as well, which just added a sense of chemistry between the different members involved, if other members of the band were getting involved with that. And I think that's just really dope. Probably because I think with the amount of color that you had within the guitar riffs and other elements there, you didn't really need to have a really kind of crazy, wildly melodic, operatic performance behind this. It wouldn't have necessarily suited the style of music that they were doing there. The kind of crispy kind of growls and stuff like that is something that is kind of, the mixed voice there is something that's a staple of the genre. That kind of hardcore stuff, it's neat. And what's kind of cool about it is that we don't have the vocals for a while. It's like we're comfortable with what we're doing instrumentally enough to be able to appreciate the surrounding elements to give what we're talking about like a floor to be on, floor to stand on. I appreciate that we have kind of paid attention to all the different sort of like ingredients within the mix seemingly equally. It's just cool though to have that kind of ferocity and expression behind it as well there. Clearly we feel very strongly about this, and it also sounds like the technique itself, the fryish stuff, is sustainable. Like we're showing good technique there. It's not something that's going to denigrate over time. So it's good job. The track itself at 4 minutes as well is just within that 2 to 4 minute sweet spot where like there is more than enough adjustment of different sort of guitarists and sort of half time and normal time and double time feels and stuff like that for us to be able to appreciate it. It's mainly guitar, bass, and drums with this one. There are some reverse takes as kind of like risers and stuff like that, and clearly the vocals are a part of it as well. This is all you really need within a piece like this. You got lead guitars and rhythm guitar parts there. It's more about the variety of riffs, the different cadences, the different tempos if applicable, and the different transfers and how the instruments interact. You have that kind of sound slowly rise up at the beginning of it, just a wonderful sort of atmosphere like someone is waking up. And there's just this crunchiness to the rhythm guitars with the various power chords they're playing alongside the kicks and the snares and how they pummel their headphones. The bass compression on the post is doing a lot of work. The bass and the low end as well is exploring the fretboard a little bit, which I appreciate. And it's just nice when the guitars do exit for a moment that the bass continues a seemingly kind of consistent sort of like intensity dynamically. It's really well mixed. I love the bass tone. And we have that consistent crunchiness, and I'm probably going to say crunchy a lot without necessarily meaning to. It's just nice to have that kind of ferocity and velocity through the piece as the vocals continue forth from like the 50-second mark or something like that. They take their time coming in, but they don't, like you've got enough variety with the different sort of picked melodic parts on the guitars outside of the chugs to keep us going. And like you've got these half-time-ish elements with like cymbals, like hi-hats, kicks, and snares there. We take our time kind of rolling along, but then we gallop around the 150 mark there, and we just kind of push forward, and it's very exciting. We go back to the bell rides and stuff like that at 2:15 there and sort of explore more of those backing vocal, main vocal, kind of like back and forths. And this is kind of push-pull that is just continuous through it. It's got this kind of like wonderful lack of predictability that makes it more exciting to listen to, which makes it even more kind of wonderful that you have that guitar solo around the 3:15 mark there, and it's such a breath of fresh air in a mix, which has kind of been kind of like choking on like the low and mid range there. Not in a bad way, it's just more, it's kind of claustrophobic in terms of how heavy it is. When you have that guitar with the way it's EQ'd kind of soaring over top with the wonderful articulations, hammer-ons and pull-offs, very fast as well, like a sense of grace and speed to it. But also there's some harmonies there between different guitar parts there. There's some bends in there that kind of make it a bit more quote-unquote melodic and epic sounding. And then just to kind of bring it back to one of the original motifs there at the end. We go back to the part where the person was down 1,000 fire. I know there's more lines than that. That's one of the ones that particularly caught my eye there. I just like the fact that we're going back to that to kind of round out the song and kind of close the loop. Thematically very satisfying, I think, outside of everything we had there, primarily because it doesn't just roll with the minor notes. You know, like it doesn't just roll with the minor scale, it also has some sort of chromatics and some sort of Phrygian flat seconds there, and it's just very kind of heavy and almost kind of feral because of that. There's a wonderful sort of array of different sort of like tom fills and sort of snare parts and kick patterns on the drum kit, and they're doing a lot in terms of the rhythm and cadence there, with again that push and pull I mentioned, but just to be able to also have and also the cadence of the vocals on top, but then to also have the guitars and bass match that in terms of a not overcomplicated but, you know, like articulate array of different notes on the guitars is good. And I think, considering the subject matter, the minor leaning to this, it's clearly not a happy topic. The major key would have been a bit weird for it. So again, I'm thankful for all the different ideas that are put into this mix. And it's just a really tight instrumental performance overall. Great chemistry with the vocalist. Studio recording, mixing, and mastering is also very, very good. Really happy with the way that sounds. You know, there's a great clarity to the vocals. The side guitars on the sides at stereo field as well. They're nice and sort of like present. You know, like again, there's a crunchiness to them. They're not over-processed either. They're not trying to make them sound too sort of smooth or clinical. No weird resonant frequencies on the frequency spectrum there. The guitars are double tracked as well, so they're nice and wide. There's a bit of bus compression, you know, but it's not too much. There is still some dynamic range, at least from a compositional perspective, and then it's nice and loud, but a pumping from the kicks, stuff sidechain limiting, you know, bus compression limiting is handled. Ultimately, a great start to proceedings there, and it's just great that the vocals are allowed to be as kind of ferocious sounding as they are in a way that doesn't, again, try to sort of like color it or sort of change it in post there. It's clearly, they just clearly know how to use their pipes, and it's great. Great start to proceedings. We've got track number 2 for today, which is 5 off the album, Dragon Reborn. And consistency with the tones, good. Oh. Dun, dun, dun. See, it just gets stuck in your head immediately, you know? Oh, filled. Tempo shift? Time signature shift? Such a cool idea to adjust the rhythm and cadence like that. It's just gristly, isn't it? And back to the riff. use of repeaters on the vocals as well in those gaps. And blast beats. Dude, this is a really special album. Like, unconditionally. That was Dragon Reborn, track number 5 off the album. Honestly, like, low-key, I'll probably listen through this album in my own time. I think it's really special. There's a lot to appreciate. If I was to talk about what I think the track is about, it sounds like, again, a dragon is reborn as some sort of god, and those who go up against it will basically boil in the lava forever, effectively. They're kind of like instigating themselves as a deity and expecting complete and instant subordination. And I kind of dig that. It's just that very middle idea, you know what I mean? So with that in mind, and with a lack of nuance that I probably need to listen through this a few more times just to get like more information to that. It's just so much to appreciate that I kind of get lost and kind of bounce between things. Ultimately though, it's just another solid, competent vocal performance here where we use these wonderful echoes and repeaters. I like the fact that they kind of bounce off in the ether in some parts there, and like we have more intensity with the drums in some parts, but then when things come back a little bit, they get a bit simpler. We go from like 30 seconds or 16 to like 8, so slower, a half-time sort of thing. Not like literally half-time, but like half as many kicks. We then are aware of that kind of adjustment, and we have the lyrics bounce around, or the vocals bounce around. It's just they're so attuned to what's required in order to keep things interesting for the listener. And I'm not glazing because I feel obligated to. It's just very cool. So, you know, ultimately, I think it's not just that the vocal technique is there's continuity with the quality of the vocal technique, the way we communicate. I like that we go da da da, and then kind of the background vocals go out on the side as well. That's a thing that kind of, we have some kind of grisly, growled kind of these screams that are just so naked in the mix because of a lack of anything else, but they just sound so ferocious and brutal. And they just have great presence in part because of how unfiltered they are. They know what they're doing. Everything's deliberate, and to be fair, it should be. And when you're making an album, but it's just very cool. I mean, structurally, the track at 4 minutes, a similar situation to Deceptive Enchanter, very well fleshed out. What's really cool about this one is that even if we have verses and choruses in different parts we go back to, we also have these adjustments of tempo and these adjustments of time signature and this mixture of different sort of like triplet orient or like main straightforward 4 parts. It's just there's so many different ideas within this piece that you kind of, again, it's a lack of predictability. You do have that solo at the end, but there's more of a kind of a bluesy orient with like the phrasing of it and stuff like that, so that's more distinct as well. But like there's a lot of pace to some of the elements within this that you just would not have assumed had you just focused on that first part of the track, the first riff there, the bow, 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 dun, 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 dun. It's just so filthy sounding. I think it's got a kind of a sludgish feel that kind of contrasts with some of the thrashy elements that you have as well. And it's just so gritty and so like demonstrably heavy that like, I just think I could have listened to more of that riff, but I nonetheless appreciate that they have other parts as well. They're kind of aware of the power of groove and rhythm and music. They're comfortable with their quarters, 8/16, and triplets, and even their 32nd or 16th triplets, that they can go very quick on the double kicks. They have gallops, they have like this like kind of machine gunish stuff going along, and they also know how to sort of flavor their fills on the sides of the stereo field as well with the drums and everything like that to sort of further develop things in a subtle way with some dynamic range to it. The guitarists keep up with it, whether it's alternate chugged palm muting parts or some sort of tremolo pick sections in the faster ones, or simply like really kind of furious power muted kind of like power chords in that lower tuning. And we use some toms, like some floor toms alongside those chugs. And it reminds me of a lot of music that I heard through the 80s and 90s and stuff like that, you know, like from like the thrashy bands from then, as well as kind of like Slayer and stuff like that. It's just great to even include some blast beats and other elements later on there, just to really sort of explore the canvas and possibilities in terms of what's doable within the genre, because there is just literally so much, because again, in part because of all the subgenres and everything like that. And when you don't put yourself in a box, you allow yourself to explore other options, and I just appreciate that we're not trying to sort of like minimize or mitigate things. The call and response with the vocals goes neatly over top of those power chordal sections, and we just have like a half dozen different riffs that we oscillate between. But again, we do this thing similarly to the previous track. We return to the chuck, we return to the groove, our main concept after we go on that adventure. So it's an interesting mixture of like a contemporary and through composed piece. I also dig as a final note, simply because a lot of the comments I can make here are very similar to Deceptive Enchanter, that the bass line, whilst less present here, is not because of a lack of bass. It's simply that the guitar is allowing less space for the bass to be by itself in this one. I love how much of a ground floor and support the bass guitar is throughout this, and I think it just ultimately the chemistry between the various guitar, bass, and drum elements is fantastic, as well as the vocals and the additional sort of like, again, echoes and other parts on there as well. It's very neat. The tempo changes change the feel of it, both literally and in terms of the perceived pace of it. They make you pay attention as a listener, and so I think thematically, in terms of the different grooves and chord progressions and bass lines and stuff we have like that, there's just not necessarily a plethora, but a combination of different ideas that Sig effortlessly, and it's very exciting to listen to. And I think that no matter whether it goes quickly or slowly, you can kind of vibe along to it. The minor key leaning is continuous through it, like, again, clearly because of the subject matter. It just suits. Again, I think there's very few genres in metal that necessarily cope with the major key anyways, but it's beside the point. I love the grinding of like the power chords and the slides and stuff like that. And I think, again, the bluesy phrasing of the lead guitar soloing in that section, it was kind of dope as well. Kind of harkens back to some of the pentatonic kind of phrasing and some of that late 80s stuff as well, which is kind of cool. Yeah, very neat. It's a very tight instrumental performance as well as per the previous part, especially like the tom fills and the double kick, the really fast parts and the tremolo kind of alt and the picking there and the harmonies and all those kind of elements, and how the vocals sit over top is tremendous. The studio recording, mixing and mastering, similar comments to Deceptive Enchanter. Vocals are well produced, compressed, EQ'd, nice use of echoes and sort of reverbs in the spaces where it's provided. The background vocals split to the side, which is really neat. It kind of goes backwards and forth. The rhythm guitar is a nice sort of side change on the side stereo field there, which just makes him sound super duper heavy. The bass is nicely compressed and EQ'd in the low end as well for a great ground floor. The drums are present throughout the stereo field as well, the toms and stuff like that, and it's just very full sounding, no weird resonant frequencies. There's dynamic range to it from a compositional perspective, not necessarily a studio production one as per the previous track, but that's simply because I think they're trying to make it sound heavier, quote unquote, and nice and loud. Bit of pumping bus compression limiting is handled, 2 for 2. But finally, the self-titled A Sleeper Awake. Let's go. Track 3 for today.
Although we should be terrified, something in his soul inside. Now the sleeper's awake. Prisoner of conscience, released from his cage. The torture within blinded sight, the body not from pride. Looking at the world through a consistent lens. Blurry reality
Wonderful.
that shatters. He sees.
Oh, that's a fun idea.
A sleeper awake.
They just threw something new in at that point. I mean, I know you heard it, but
Vision. Part of him only knew he was asleep. Subconscious decision. Stabbing the chest to the heart with a stake. Reality sinks in. All these years his whole life was a waste. Corrupted life sleeping.
great uses of pinches as well.
Looking at the world through a consistent lens. This is reality. Light shattered. He sees. Now the sleeper awakes.
They love their shred, don't they? The tremolo work. How are we gonna end this?
Without change, something sleeps inside us and seldom awakens.
That bass, man.
A sleeper must awaken.
That's a hell of a finish. That's a very strong, confident finish. Just ending it like that with things repeating out into the darkness. That's crazy, dude. Well done. Well done. I don't think I've ever... It's been a while since I felt as excited about an album that I'm reviewing. Because this was a sleeper awake. I can understand what the album is about now from listening through this. And that's probably one of the biggest compliments that I can provide, is that even though I've listened to only 3 of these tracks, I kind of get a feeling for what the whole entire thing is about, without them also having given the game away too much or too bluntly. It encourages you to think about it, but like not in a way where it's babysitting you or kind of like patronizing you. You can kind of pick out the steps. They just provide you with enough information. I kind of get it. I think a sleeper awake is talking about someone who has maybe become aware of the injustices or inadequacies of the world around them. Maybe they've been stuck inside themselves. As the person speaking quietly at the end of that sample was saying, everyone's got a sleeper inside of them, you know. And when they awaken, that's maybe their true self. So when you talk about like Dragon Reborn, that's a person coming to awareness of who they really are and kind of becoming conscious. You know, Deceptive Enchanter is maybe people manipulating those states of people in a way that suits their needs personally, as opposed to what's really best for the people who are starting to sort of like awaken. Either way, just great use of that sample at the end there, just to kind of provide a bit of further kind of like cinematic context to it. It's just great to have a different vocal line. The guy just kind of crying out at the end and then just silence there. It's just as you wake up, it's like it is invigorating because of how blunt it is. So it's almost like you're snapped out of the trance that you're in listening to the music itself. And I think the vocals in general across this, similar comments to previous parts of the album, just really satisfied with it. It's this kind of grinding, gritty sort of tonality to the entire sort of approximate of the track there. And you leave it feeling like, yeah, no, they had a consistent quality on the mic. They know what they're doing. They're very comfortable. And they know how to both communicate in the way that expresses a similar sentiment to how they feel, as well as in a way that suits the kind of textures and timbres of the instruments around them, as well as stylistically being quite appropriate, you know. Sort of, again, sustainable technique as well, which I appreciate there. We don't want to sort of lose our vocal cords, you know. We want to be able to sort of keep doing this. But I also like the fact that we just simply allowed the lead guitar to have a lot more real estate within this piece. It was a different track. I mean, at 4 minutes 35, it's longer, so therefore you'd need it to arguably be more arranged in terms of like the riffs or like in terms of the development of the composition and stuff like that. But then we just had that sort of extended guitar solo section. And I like the fact that with this album in general across the last 2 tracks, I mean, the solos have been developed, but they've also been kind of short, or at least they've been considerably shorter than this one. It's almost like in this one, they understood there wasn't as much that they necessarily needed to say or insinuate. So instead they allowed the guitar to kind of, guitar and bass and drums sort of play off each other and have their time in the sun. And I just thought that was very cool. You just start with the rattle of the hi-hats and the kicks and everything like that. And you go into these kind of very kind of brash sounding, uncomfortable sounding chords there with a bit of dissonance with the tritones, or even like augmented chords maybe, I'm not sure. And you go through the familiar power chords and sort of like single note kind of melodies there rolling through chromatics within previous parts. But there was this part where the guitars went to the sides there, and it was like a filtered take that I hadn't really heard before, and it was almost like the music was washing over you, and it was a very surreal experience. I like the kind of thump of the percussion as it continues through it, and like the way the track just kind of continues to offer you different like angles to a similar concept. And then again, we have 1.5 minutes of the guitar, bass, and drums of the vocals kind of like indicating over top, and we adjust the groove and pace of it there, kind of have different accents on certain notes and switch up the flow of the drums there, kind of working with triplets and all going through straight 16ths and stuff like that there, which is something we've done with prior ones. But just to have the guitar with its bends and sort of like tremolo tricks and everything like that, tremolo bar tricks and all that kind of stuff, legato feel there, being more melodic as a contrast to the vocalist across the majority of the album, with like occasional sort of tension and strain with the tremolo pick parts, kind of exploring more pentatonics and bluesy scalings, as well as like kind of major and minor-ish kind of elements there underneath the guitar rhythm, over top, should I say, of the guitar rhythm and drums, the rhythm parts, just kind of having their time in the sun, as I mentioned prior there. It's just, it's something we haven't had in the album yet. I just think it was a cool idea at the end there to kind of almost give a shout out to the people, other people made sort of like the music work. To have things kind of go down for that vocal sample, there was a clever idea in part, because I think it makes you focus more on what's being said by the quieter sort of almost whispered vocals. And then you have that bass coming, it's so filthy and heavy and sort of ruthless, and you can kind of hear that it's being picked there and it's nicely compressed, so it just has that menace to it. And then you just have it kind of be done. You had that final vocal line, and then you're sorted. It just flew by. It's interesting, really cool music. So I feel like there was again a proficient performance across the board from the guitar, bass, and drums, as well as the vocalist. Great chemistry between different elements. A sufficient amount of different riffs, chord progressions, bass lines, and drum patterns there, with a mixture of kind of like half-time, all-time parts there, and triplets and sixteenths as well to kind of sway things up. And just sort of thematically, I suppose, as a closing note, it's just great to have that minor key continue, but to be able to appreciate a lot more sort of like note choices through the added flavor of the extended lead guitar passages, as well as the different scales outside of the major and minors there with the blues, pentonics, chromatics, etc. And to sort of not kind of separate too much from what we had prior, while still kind of furthering what they're trying to accomplish. Really well done. Great sort of through composed experience. Again, great use of sampling there. Never became dull, no filler. Nice tight, no note out of place. It's great to hear people playing their instruments. As a closing note, I can tell that they're playing their instruments, they're not keying stuff in. This is an organic performance. It's just chef's kiss. Studio recording, mixing, and mastering. Again, similar comments to the previous two tracks. Great sort of balancing of the guitar, vocals, bass and drums there, rhythm and lead parts there, the sample at the end there. There's dynamic range from a compositional perspective as per when things came down at the end. Great use of echoes with the vocals at the end, things kind of panning out to the side stereo field, as well as the backing vocals and all that kind of stuff. No resonant frequencies in the frequency spectrum there. Things are well niched, nice and wide in the stereo field. Bus compression limiting is handled, vocals aren't overproduced. Very positive feedback on this track in general, as well as the album in general, and we're going to talk about it more in the conclusion. Guys, welcome to the conclusion of my review of this album from an act named Omnism, titled Sleep or Awake. The three tracks that I've looked through today being Deceptive, Enchanter, as well as Dragon Reborn, and the self-titled track Asleep or Awake. In this section, I'm going to provide an overall analysis of these three tracks, so everything from lyrics and vocals all through studio production, as well as any applicable constructive critique, and then finally my general thoughts from a listener's perspective. Before we go any further, what do we think this album is about? Because this is going to be more specific across the board comments. If you want my individual thoughts, you've got to go check out the actual individual song conclusions at the end of each track. But like overall, I think this album is about people realizing their true selves. They're maybe being in a trance or a lull, or not really being able to sort of focus on themselves or what is really happening. I think that line at the end from that sort of sample, that guy talking about how like everyone's got to sleep inside of them and finally awaken, it's almost like you get the hook line at the end, and everything before it, with like the Dragon Reborn being about the dragon, kind of like everyone being sort of like melting at the behest of the deity, like Deceptive, Enchanter, people lighting fires and sort of being burned to life. There's like imagery there that continues through it, but I just think ultimately it's about people. I could be completely misconstruing or misunderstanding it. It's either about people being put into sleep maliciously and trying to awaken from that, or simply people as a general not realizing their true selves and like needing to sort of find that fire in order to sort of live out their best life, I suppose. And this sounds kind of like a bit cheesy when I say it like that, but there's clearly an edge to it, and that's not just because of the way things sound there. Part of it is just the velocity and the viciousness of the vocal technique, which I love. To be clear, I think it's fantastic. We've got a sustainable vocal technique, and a lot of it is done this very kind of like gritty, very kind of visceral style there with the fry, the vocal fry there, the mixed voice, the kind of crowd chants on the sides as well are great for a bit of added kind of like oomph to it. and a bit of kind of adjustment of how we interpret those parts. But it's just so ruthless with how it sounds there. And I adore the fact that we were unrelenting with that technique. We had some quieter parts again with the sample voice at the end. And we also knew when to not be there vocally, as in we had that extended guitar solo section within A Sleeper Awake. We had Deceptive Enchanter. We took a while, like 50 seconds, to come in with the vocals in the first place, which was really neat. And so ultimately it's just incredibly satisfying. We've got no complaints at all, really. In terms of how the vocals were done. We're clearly very sort of we're experienced on the microphone. We know how to tell a story. The words came through clearly. They had sort of solid cadence, and we adjusted to all the different tempos and time changes and rhythm changes, half time, normal time, etc. that were thrown at us by the guitar, bass, and drum elements underneath us. The tracks themselves, outside of a really competent vocal performance, which I think expressed itself very, very well, and you to use echoes for a bit of kind of like extra kind of ambience and flair, I suppose, for lack of a better word. You had guitar, bass, and drums playing tracks that were practically through composed, but you did have some sort of like verse and chorus returns. It's just that these themes returned when they felt like it. Deceptive Enchanter and Dragon Reborn had these opening riffs that they returned to later on in the piece, and it kind of tied up the track neatly in a bow. It's kind of like a one-on-one on music that if you go on a journey, you kind of want to let the listener know, hey, this is still a part of it, because you just have like 6 riffs and they're all different. It's cool, but it can also just be a bit too random for people who aren't that used to it. So I appreciate that Omnism have tried to sort of like be aware of both sides of the coin. If we talk about the individual instruments themselves, because like there's just too much range structurally to really sort of provide an overall view on it. Like we had, I mean, to be fair, each of the tracks had a solo section with Deceptive Enchanter having the shorter solo section, and Trap, A Sleeper Awake having like a near a minute long one, because it had the real estate to do so. And I don't think we needed to do as much storytelling at that point. We'd kind of said a lot of we needed to earlier, but like there's just so much cool stuff going on with the rhythm guitars, like the various sort of palm chord elements, the palm muted chord, just all the palm muted kind of chordal elements there, power chords there, the picked notes, the chromatics, the flat seconds there, some of those heavier kind of elements, like tremolo picking, adjustments of groove in terms of the quarters, triplets, and sixteenths that is mirrored on the drums, which we'll talk about in a moment. Just ferocious, and it's just such a brutal sounding guitar tone as well. It's so filthy sounding. It's just, it chugs. There's some notes which had a catchiness to it, in part because of the focus on rhythm and groove orient there, because of how slow they were. You kind of like nod your head along to it. It was like a breakdown before we'd gotten even to the meat of it, but it was just so cool to have that kind of viciousness be something that you want to be a part of, if that makes sense. Just the personality from the guitar alone, even when it's kind of minimalist, is really, really tight. And I again, that's not even talking about the lead guitar parts, which was such a contrast and a breath of fresh air, when again, a lot of the music was sort of focused on the lower to mid end, and very kind of claustrophobic, and kind of like it slams you down there, throws you about with a variety of different tempo and sort of time signature changes and stuff like that, mixtures of sort of main orients towards like the 8th or 16th versus like the triplets in 16th 30 seconds, or 16th triplets, should I say. It's just cool to have a lot of the kind of bluesy pentatonic phrasing, the minor and major orients there, modal changes there, lots of different articulations on the lead guitar as well, a variety of different hammer-ons and pull-offs, slides, tremolo, bar tricks, or wow, that kind of stuff like that. Always in a way where it kind of made sense from like an actual solo perspective, as in like there was a lack of melody in the vocals for the vast majority of it. So you kind of were going, okay, I understand that this has more room to breathe in part because of that. And it always had its own time to shine. Like the vocalist would very rarely, if never really, kind of interfere with that. It was a cutoff, like this is the guitarist part. At the end of the album there with The Sleeper Awake, the guitar, bass, and drums, rhythm parts, and leads, they kind of have their own time to sort of like vibe off of each other and sort of play forward. And there's so much real estate for the lead guitarist to play over, but it doesn't feel like filler, and it doesn't feel superfluous. It's almost like they've restrained themselves with shorter passages, ultimately to a point where they kind of become more of a melodic vocalist, or melodic lead in a piece there without needing to shred the entire time. And don't get me wrong, there's some really sort of fast stuff going on there, but I just like the fact that we can take up time with our bands a little bit as well and adjust the speed of it to kind of add more variety in it, So yeah, ultimately the rhythm guitar, lead guitar parts are fantastic. The bass is tremendous. I love how heavy it is, how they've compressed and EQ'd it, how just kind of grunty it is. The presence of the bass when it comes in and you don't have those guitars there, especially like in A Sleeper Awake, as well as Deceptive Enchanter and those parts where the guitars took a break, it's just ruthless. It's one of my favorite parts. I love when people get their bass guitar tones tight. They don't have to be a minimalist kind of sleepy little thing in the bottom. They can punch you in the teeth and they can knock you out if they want to. I like that. It had its own personality, explored the fretboard a little bit, and was tight with the rhythm guitar parts. And then we talk about the drums. And just as a closing note on the drums, I loved them. I thought the drums were fantastic. It's not just that we covered our main sort of fundamental quarter eighth, 16th, and 36, like triplet notes. We also had 32nds and 16th triplets there. We also knew when to have less. We knew when to have more. We knew to kind of pull back and adjust the tempo. We handled those almost metronomically. And I adore the fact that we're as tight as we were, that we actually played the drums, that we didn't feel the need to overproduce, and sort of like, it was just a tight performance with chemistry between the different musicians involved there. And it sounded like they could play this just as well live as if they were in the studio. It's very pleasant to listen to a band when they can play well, and the variety of different sort of like tom elements there, floor toms, as well as the kind of grooves on the blast beats and machine gun double kicks and everything like that, and bell ride and crash and hi-hat patterns there. There's just so many different ideas on the drum kit that they never took the listener's attention for granted. And incredibly strong music for sure. And they were so aware of each other. I suppose to avoid rambling or going on a tangent, drums good, bass and guitar good, great. Vocals had a fantastic chemistry with those. There was an awareness of when we needed to take turns, we needed to come together. There were moments where there were pauses there. We slowed down with each other, we came up, there were reverse takes there. And we also knew at the end, for everyone to stop, let the silence fade us out, and it was awesome. So yeah, honestly, really tight instrumental performances across the board there. Thematically, it's minor key orient, because why would you have this in a major key? There were just too many different guitar riffs, bass lines, and drum beats to count there. We were spoiled as listeners, especially if you're fans of the genre there. This is what people need to be making. This is the kind of music that people need to be making in this genre. They need to provide this amount of variety and diversity within their songs. They need to make it special, and they need to play it properly. And I just like the fact that we used the chromatics. So we had some sort of thrashy, bluesy kind of stuff there, that we weren't afraid of using notes outside the major or minor to kind of have a zest. But also that even if we used some diminished or augmented, it was not done in a way which was deliberately edgy. Like, we had heaviness, but it's not done in a way that's almost artificial, or like, hey, look at how heavy we are. I like the thump of things and the groove and sort of like cadence of the different rhythmic parts, as well as the vocals and how they integrated, especially with the lack of melody in the vocals a lot of the time. But yeah, honestly, just great variety in terms of different. But we also, again, there was some riffs that caught my head as well. So ultimately, I give this full score in terms of actual theme, because if I'm enjoying and remembering a riff, it's worked. Without involuntarily nodding my head along to it, that riff has worked. And so just finally, the studio recording, mixing, and mastering is wonderful. I love the quality of the vocal performance there, nice use compression EQs, occasional sort of echoes with some of the fill out parts. The backing vocals kind of surround you in the stereo field there. I think the guitar is nicely double tracked, great tone to them as well, nice and crunchy. Distortion there, rhythm, lead parts are nicely EQ'd, sort of sit on top of the mid to highs there, and they contrast neatly and have great presence. The bass line nicely compressed and EQ'd as well, and sort of filthy with its distortion. So you used filthy a lot, I apologize. I'm trying to use different words. And the drums spread around the stereo field and free spectrum. You can hear them more clearly. Just great thump to the drums and kicks and snares. But there's enough dynamic range to both be dangerous with it, as well as not to be distracting. Nice and loud bus compression limiting is handled. And again, dynamic range from a composition perspective, because of how well things were glued. They needed to for this kind of music. It's totally fine. No applicable constructive critique, no notes. From a final general listener's perspective, I'll be keeping an eye on these guys. And I don't say that often as a reviewer. I wish every review made me feel happy after listening to it. And that's not exclusive. I want to feel good when I listen to all the music I review. It's not something that is realistic, but I am thankful for when I listen through an album, I go, damn, they can play, they clearly care about their music, and I feel like they're going to go places. And I wish everyone involved all the best of luck in future with their musical endeavors. Because thank you for listening to or watching my review of this. I'm a bit overwhelmed. Watching my review of this, these 3 tracks off an album from Omnism titled Sleep or Awake. Hopefully you enjoyed it. If you did, please go show them some love via the various social medias and Spotify page, and stay cool and stay safe, and please remember to support your local musicians and artists at this point in time, as they need to help more than ever with all the crazy stuff going on in the world. And I will catch you in the next SPRX. Spiderhands out.